started now. Thank you all for coming today. Let me get my screen situated. Go ahead and make my slides big. All right, hi everyone. My name is Kate Bradford and I am Associate Director of Career Services at the Professional Development and Career Office at Johns Hopkins University. I guess for the sake of storytelling, since that's a theme of the Leadership Alliance, I got my undergraduate degree at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I think that's also a theme of today. I think at least 3 of the speakers are affiliated, no, 4 with Chapel Hill. And then I went on and did a post-baccalaureate fellowship at the NIH, and then went to Johns Hopkins University where I got my PhD in cell biology. Spent 2 years at a postdoc at the FDA studying infectious disease and vaccines, and then ended up back at Hopkins in my current role about 3 years ago. So today we are talking about building a professional online brand. And of course, I wanted to share my own Twitter account with you all. So if you are on Twitter and want to share any of this, please feel free to and tag me. All right, so a couple just brief instructions for today, just to make sure things go smoothly. Everyone will be muted and the videos will be off, just for the sake of keeping things nice and easy. So if you do have a question, please use the chat box. I have it pulled up on my screen and we'll try to check it regularly. This session is being recorded, so if you wanted to go to another one or you stop paying attention for a little bit, that's totally fine. You can come back and watch later. And as I said, if you do want to screenshot and share something, please feel free to do so. Just kind of check with me first. All right, so the agenda for today. So the first section we'll cover is kind of what's the point of taking ownership of your online presence, and kind of answering the questions, do you really have to put yourself on the internet? What's the point? Why? What are the benefits? Then I'm going to go through several different platforms that are available to put yourself on the internet. I'm going to go through professional profiles, content creation, hosting websites, and social media websites. And then I'll kind of give you some guidelines about which of those to choose, because you cannot be on all of these platforms at once. That would be a full-time job. And then finally, we'll kind of end up on tips to keep it quote unquote professional. There are reasons I put that in quotes because I think the term professional means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So we'll talk about some specifics for that, some very, very general do's and don'ts. And yeah, and during the whole time, please feel free to ask questions in the chat box. All right. So the alternative name I have for this session is "If you're not online, you don't exist." And I know that's kind of a very big statement to make, but what I mean by this is that in today's day and age, and especially now with coronavirus, if you're not online, it's very difficult to find out who you are, what your contact information is, what your area of expertise is, and as Kizzy said, what your story is. So obviously I have a little asterisk here, and what I am kind of meaning by that asterisk is that I do want to say with this whole presentation that I do understand there are certain cases where people do not want to put themselves on the internet for extremely and completely valid reasons. So if you, for any number of reasons, feel that you want to kind of keep some of your life or all of your life private, I totally understand. The internet is just one tool we have to use to brand ourselves, but being on the internet is not the end all be all. And there are certain ways where you can put the minimal amount of information on the internet you need in order to kind of further your career. So first, we are going to launch right into a poll. So the poll is basically just so I can get an idea of what kind of websites or platforms do you use professionally right now. We have the scholarly ones up, like the academia.edu, ResearchGate, OrcID, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, personal websites, GitHub, OrcID, And if there's any others that are not represented on here, please throw them into the chat. I'm always interested to hear what kind of websites and platforms people are using professionally. Oh, I think I set this up wrong. Is it only allowing you to choose one? I thought I set this up so you can choose multiple, but based on the answers I'm seeing, it maybe only did one. All right, we'll go ahead and end it there. Oh, yes, just one. I'm sorry, my bad on that one. That's what I get for making this poll last minute. Okay, so I'm sure many of y'all are actually using multiple of these different websites. So on this poll, it looks like a lot of you are on LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm sure many of you have some of these other ones, so I apologize for that. So where we're gonna back up is I would like you all to do this exercise, and I encourage you to do this a couple times a year or every few years. Just take note of where you are on your Google search. So Google is your first impression these days, especially now where we literally are not seeing people in person. The first impression we have of people is the space they take up on the internet. So if you're anything like me, when people email me and I don't know who they are, generally the first thing I do is go straight into Google and Google their name plus whatever institution or company they're a part of. I do this for a couple of reasons. One, I want to know, is this person who they say they are? Can I validate on a couple different websites that they are who they say they are? Especially if I'm using this person as a speaker or I'm trying to look at this person as a potential contact. I just want to validate who they are before I make a strong connection with them. So as an exercise, I want you guys to either pull up another browser window or pick up your phone and go to a private window, the private window in your internet browser. And then Google your name. And some of you may need to Google, for me, I know I have to Google Kate Bradford plus Johns Hopkins or Kate Bradford plus UNC, because then I can kind of see different sorts of things that come up. Kate Bradford is a somewhat common name, so there are other Kates out there. But in order to find me, I just add Hopkins. And then I take account of what I'm seeing in there. So hopefully you all can go take a minute and Google yourselves. And then over here, usually I make this kind of an annotate with exercise, but I turned off annotation for the moment. So just take note of all the different options you have on this Google yourself bingo and see which of those you actually have for your Google presence. I'm going to Google myself again. All right. So how many of y'all were able to Google yourself and found that your name, oh, you can't see this, is the top hit? So for me, when I Google Kate Bradford plus Hopkins, the top hit is the link to the office of the website for my office. And then comes my LinkedIn profile, and then my Twitter, and then some other things that I've done. So do any of y'all, I guess you can type in the chat, who owns the top hit? Nice work. Good, good. Awesome. And if you didn't come up to the top, that's totally okay. I don't think you necessarily have to be the top hit, but if you can be on that first page of Google, that's kind of a good goal to have. And we can talk about ways that you can strategically kind of make yourself first on Google. Generally, my thoughts are you just want to be able to easily find one kind of professional page. So whether it be a LinkedIn or an academia.edu, somewhere that connects you to your discipline, your lab, or your work. Right, so your Google results are biased toward your search history, which is why I recommended you go to a private window, which in theory should erase all of those cookies or whatnot, and should eliminate some of that biases based on my limited understanding of how internet works. But Yeah. Okay. And so I highlighted the things in here that are generally good. You want to be on the first page of Google. If you're the top hit, that's awesome. If you can have multiple instances you have on the front page, that's really great. So these can be like if you were written up in an article or you did a podcast, something like that. Again, not necessary, but can be good for your career. You also want it to be really easy to find which department, program, or university you're affiliated with. Some universities are better than others about promoting their own students. I know a lot of the PhD programs at Hopkins are now starting to create little profiles for each of their students all on the program website, just for the sake of having at least one place on the internet where the student is validated as a student of this program in this university. I think that's a really great thing for universities to do. I wish all of them did that, but what can you do? If your PhD program doesn't currently do that, maybe bring it up as an idea at one of the next meetings. So of course, being on the front page of Google is great. And if you have a lab website that comes up, that's awesome as well. Now, did anyone find any pictures where they're like, oh gosh, I didn't realize that picture was on the internet, or I thought I took that picture down years ago? Kind of those original social media platforms that we all joined, back in undergrad or high school. Sometimes those can come back to haunt us. So if you do find those really, really old profiles pop up, kind of look and take a second look at those and see if you can remember your password and take them down. I remember I was actually about to apply for postdocs, and this was about 5 years ago. Just casually was like, let's just see what's on Google, just for fun. And I found, so pre-Facebook, there was another website. I didn't even realize I had joined this website, put up a picture that was embarrassing for me to have up there. And it even had like my dorm address from, 2005. Thankfully, I'm, one of those people who's dumb and uses the same password. So I was able to eliminate that profile, but you just want to be aware of all of those different places you put yourself on the internet back when you weren't really thinking about your presence. So your digital footprint. So your digital footprint, the idea of this is every place you are on the internet. And my basic point of today is to just take action of this footprint. Curate who you are on the internet. The pro of the internet these days is that there's so many different platforms and so many different ways to put yourself on the internet that you can really curate your brand and who you are. And there's basically, if you take a passive approach to this, you're either going to not be able, or people won't be able to figure out who you are. They're going to play a game of guess who. Is this Alex Smith over here or Alex Smith over here? Can't figure out which one they're actually trying to contact. You can look like you're a ghost where, they Google your name and they can't find anything about you. Or you're going to look kind of out of touch with the internet and out of touch with the fact that it's 2020 and so many people are on the internet that you need to look professional on there. So if you have outdated profiles or things that just, aren't looking as good as they could for where you are in your career, that could have a negative impact on you. So today I want to encourage you all to take action for your digital footprint. As Kizzy said, tell your own story. And regardless of the size of your digital footprint, whether you have one, LinkedIn page or one academia.edu page, curate that and make it fit who you are. I do want to take a note. I said this earlier. Again, if there are reasons you don't want to be on the internet, that's totally fine. But I would encourage you to also really take action on that, because other people can be talking about you on the internet and you want to be aware of that. So even if you don't want to have a digital footprint or you want to have a really small one, that takes some effort as well. All right. So before we dive into all of the different platforms, I do want to address some of the fears and concerns people have about joining the internet, quote unquote, professionally. So do you all have any concerns or fears about being on the professional side of the internet? And if so, go ahead and type them in the chat box. Being too controversial, absolutely. Discrimination, yep. Those are both very valid fears. Maintaining continuity across different platforms and keeping your brand consistent, yep. It's definitely kind of, it can be high maintenance the more platforms you use. Exactly. Any other fears that you all have? Fighting the right battle. Oh yeah, personal versus professional with trying to seem like a real person. Absolutely. This is something I continue to struggle with to this day. So I'll give you my advice, but that's something that's really hard to balance. All right, so none of y'all actually said this, but some people want to be invisible. They're like, I don't want to be that public. I just want to have like my baby toe on the internet and that's it. Another thing, some people believe that it's a waste of time. I especially hear this with, Twitter. People feel like it is a time suck. It is a time, or it can be a time suck. Some people used to feel that LinkedIn was a waste of time. It's no longer a waste of time anymore. Some people say, they want to be on the internet, they want to engage on these different platforms, but they just don't know what to say, or they're not confident in their voice, or they have a fear of being too controversial, saying the wrong things. Can I talk about politics? Can I share my opinion about this? And those are extremely valid concerns, because especially in this day and age of cancel culture, you do have to be kind of careful about what you share. And then finally, which, I've been giving this talk for probably 2.5 years now. And back 2.5 years ago, when I started giving these types of talks about being on the internet, there was this kind of myth that the real academics don't have social media, or they don't have time for social media, or they're just somehow above it. Now I think that's kind of gone away. So this is a slide that I have for my presentations at Hopkins. So all of these people I'm showing here, most of them are from Hopkins. But now this day and age, you can find Nobel laureates on Twitter. You can find leaders of universities. All different types of faculty from all disciplines are on Twitter. And of course, our keynote speaker today is very well known on Twitter. So this myth that academics or real scientists don't have time to share their work on the internet is completely false. And I think a lot of scientists have found a lot of value in sharing their work and finding communities on the internet. So I have this wheel of the 5 benefits, or the 5 C's to an online presence. So you have connect, collaborate, curate, create, and communicate. So connect. This is one of my favorite parts of being online professionally, is the ability to connect with anyone and everyone involved in my discipline or outside of my discipline. So being on Twitter professionally has allowed me to directly connect with the leadership of my own university in a way I never would have before. I can, reply to a vice provost tweet and get an answer directly from him. Previously, that was never an option. You can try to email the leadership of your university, but having them reply back in a timely manner is maybe something that wouldn't happen. And I can also connect with people who work in my discipline all over the world very easily and in an instant. It's awesome. You can also build new collaborations on the internet. So I was kind of thinking this was like a mythical thing, that collaborations could start via a DM, until I was approached, actually twice within the last year. I would tweet about something I was working on, and I would get a direct message from someone saying, hey, I'm working on the same stuff. Like, let's chat and see if we can build a new collaboration. So that is a very real thing that happens when you're using and engaging on the internet. Again, you can curate, and you can curate 2 things. You can either curate your own work in new forms. So say if you want to curate videos or graphics or programming code, but you can also curate what I like to call your personal learning network. And the personal learning network is basically where you get your information from. So it's the news feed of, whatever platform you're looking at. So on Twitter, I make sure to follow a diverse set of voices. I also follow grant agencies, government agencies, biotech, just so I can know what's happening in the world in the areas that I care about. So I'm curating my news every day. You can also create content. So this is kind of along the lines with curate. You can create new fields of science, new ways to look at your science. And then finally, communication, obviously. You can write in many different formats. You can write from a tweet to a blog post to a LinkedIn white paper. And basically, you have these 4 ideas of your personal learning network. You can increase the visibility of your own work by talking about it more on the internet. It is now proven that if you tweet about your work, you will get more reads of your paper. It's kind of basic marketing 101, but it does work. Whether or not it leads to more citations, jury is still out on that. You can also establish your credibility and your expertise on a topic, and you can develop new relationships. And as Kizzy said, I actually screenshotted this from her keynote speech because I loved it so much. If you don't tell your own story, someone else will. So by curating your online brand, you can curate your story and you tell your story, not having someone make up assumptions of you based off of your lack of use of the internet. All right, so now getting into the nitty-gritty of how do you actually build this brand? What platforms are out there? So step 1, we actually kind of did part 1 of step 1, which is Google yourself. So the second part of this is to take note of all those old profiles out there, or if your LinkedIn is kind of outdated, and go ahead and set aside some time to update all of those profiles or delete those profiles. You can also set up a Google alert on your name. I always recommend doing this. And if you have multiple different versions of your name, make sure you set up a Google alert for each of those. So like my first name is, my published name is Mary Catherine. My, casual name is Kate. So I have Google alerts for all of those different versions. And really, you can create a Google alert for anything. So if you have an interest in your specific protein, whatnot, go ahead and create a Google alert for it. And this basically just sends you an email every time your name is, published in an article or something like that. Oh, I do recommend if you have like a Twitter account or an Instagram account or something like that, also create a Google alert of your handle. So your @whatever handle. And the reason I recommend this is that in some articles, people actually quote your Twitter without asking you. So it's always good to be aware of where your name is being put out there. So another thing I recommend, and this goes back to one of the comments about how to keep track of it all. So this is actually a PhD student I work with who is now graduated. So shout out to Ben Ackerman. He let me take a picture of this because he actually has a great digital presence. And the way he keeps track of it is just this really simple little figure. And so he wrote down all the different platforms he uses. And then he takes note of where his CV is and where his list of publications are. That way, if you publish something new, you have to update it on your CV. You also have to re-upload it into Google Scholar, website, and ResearchGate. He also has on here the little arrows. So, on your website, you can connect out to different platforms. So he made sure that, his GitHub is connected to his website and vice versa, just so you're aware of where everything is pushing and pulling information. All right, so now getting into which platforms do I choose? There are so many platforms out there. I don't have all of them represented here, but these are the kind of biggest ones for STEM to use. And I'm going to break them down into the social media and community building, content creation and sharing, and then scholarly and professional profiles. Now, a few of these platforms actually span all of these. So I would say LinkedIn is one of those. It's your professional profile. You can create content, and it does have a social media aspect to it. They actually just created like Insta stories for LinkedIn, which I think is interesting. We'll see how people use that. But it's been cool to see these different platforms kind of morph into one mega platform where you can do all of these different things in one place. And don't feel like you have to join all of these. I'm going to tell you which ones are worth engaging in, which ones are kind of like extra credit and which kinds are more like extra credit. All right, so the scholarly and professional profiles, these are pretty straightforward. What's the point of these? These basically validate your expertise and your connection to your institution and your scholarly work. So these are the ones, you know, it's mostly just a professional profile, connects you to the papers that you've published. So the first thing, and this is the number one thing I actually do encourage everyone here to have, is an ORC ID. So an ORC ID is an open researcher and contributor ID. This is basically your social security number as a published scholarly author. So it's unique to each person, regardless of your name. And if your name changes throughout your life, that's totally fine. Your ORC ID is going to stay the same. More and more commonly, the ORC ID is now required for fellowship applications. You can put it on your CV, and it's also required for some publications now as well. And so ORC ID does have kind of a profile to it, aspect to the profile or to the platform, but to me it's always kind of confusing and clunky to use, and no one actually goes to like look at the ORC ID website to look at your publications. It's more just a platform to get this number. So I know at Hopkins, and I'm sure at a lot of other institutions, the library is actually the place you go to get a guide on how to create your ORC ID and how to actually officially connect it to your home institution. So if you are at Hopkins, go to Google Hopkins Library ORC ID, and you'll be able to find that information right there. And then we have the scholarly profiles. So these are the biggest ones that are out there: ResearchGate, academia.edu, and Google Scholar. So all of these have a profile section to them, and they also can exist as like an online repository for your published work, be it a paper, a journal article, presentations, posters, slide decks, and whatnot. And some of them do have a bit of a social networking aspect, or I know ResearchGate has the question and answer forum. Google Scholar, as far as I know, is pretty much just kind of a straightforward profile connecting you to your publications. ResearchGate and academia.edu also do some calculations about impact factor, citations, and whatnot. However, I do want to warn you, with both ResearchGate and academia.edu, they have some controversy behind them. So both of these platforms have been sued for copyright infringement, and both of them have some concerns about data privacy and use of their data. So I wouldn't say either of these are like wonderful to use. I think different disciplines have their preference for which platform they prefer. I don't recommend having all three. I think I just have a Google Scholar. I deleted my academia.edu because that one, you had to pay for more, and it was just getting more and more kind of iffy on whether or not I really wanted to affiliate myself with that platform. And then I do still have a ResearchGate, just because in my discipline that seemed to be the one that was most popular. And then you have LinkedIn. And I know some people wouldn't necessarily group LinkedIn in with the scholarly profiles, but I do now, because LinkedIn has really changed lately from being purely kind of like a business-focused platform to really incorporating and being friendly to all types of disciplines in all types of career fields. You can now link your publications right onto LinkedIn, link the different authors and whatnot. So I see it as a way better professional profile than any of the other profiles out there. And so for me, I use LinkedIn as my main kind of personal website, because I don't feel like dealing with building my own website. So LinkedIn is the place where I kind of host my main professional content. And the reason for that is that LinkedIn is just the biggest one. It's going to have the most staying power, it has the most money, and it has the most users and the most active users. I'm sure you've been on ResearchGate or academia.edu and seen how many people have old information or just kind of dead or dying profiles. That's not so much the case on LinkedIn. The newsfeed is active. I have scientists on there posting from academia, scientists from biotech, scientists from FDA, all in my network, posting their latest science and posting the updates in their field. So you can really use LinkedIn. I kind of highlighted it in that beginning section where I was going through all the platforms, because it can really be a multi-tool on the internet. It's your personal website. It's a place where you can manage all your contacts. It has great alumni database features. You can obviously search for and apply for jobs. It's probably the biggest place to list for jobs. I found my postdoc on LinkedIn. It's also a great place for your personal learning network. And it's now a place where you can share content and create content through the kind of like white paper or blogging feature of LinkedIn. If you want to write an article, you no longer have to go to, or create your own blog. You can just put it right on LinkedIn and push it out to all of your followers right there. All right, so that's kind of the end of my section on the scholarly profiles. So I'd just like to check in and see which of these profiles do you think y'all will use? Will you stick to the ResearchGate, academia.edu, Google Scholar, LinkedIn? Which combination will you use? Just kind of throw it in the chat box. I'll throw mine in. Great, it looks like a lot of LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn's just gotten so much better lately. I love how LinkedIn, you can actually share multimedia on your different work experiences. So if you ever give a talk that's published to the internet on YouTube, you can link it right into your work experience, which I think is awesome. Yeah, and with all of these profiles, it's hard to keep it updated. I know my LinkedIn needs to be updated, which is hilarious considering I teach LinkedIn on a regular basis. Not as great on updating it. All right, so moving on to the content creation and sharing platforms. So I will say these are the platforms that I don't use personally. I love following other people, but I don't use these as much just because this takes a lot of work and people do amazing work on there. But this is a place where if you want to use or want to pursue science communication or outreach, I really encourage you to look at the work that people are doing on these platforms because it's really amazing and really inspiring. And the reason people use these is because your work doesn't speak for itself. So I say this because we publish our work in academic journals, which first of all, not everyone can read because they're behind a paywall. And second of all, they're in a language where really only people in your specific discipline can even understand what's going on. So it's a very narrow audience. So by using these other platforms, you can share your work with a much broader audience and in so many different ways. You can make a 15-second TikTok about it. You can do an entire Instagram post about it or a 10-minute YouTube video. You can share slides on SlideShare, write a blog on your personal website, or even do an Ask Me Anything on Reddit. There are so many different ways to talk about science. And I really encourage you, if that's something you're interested in, take a look at these different platforms to see where you can share your work. So personal websites. So a personal website really can be your professional profile as well. You're going to have the most flexibility with a professional website because you can do whatever you want. I am not a professional website expert. I have built a Google site before and it was fairly easy. So if I can do it, I think other people can do it. There are multiple different platforms, Wix, WordPress, Squarespace, all those other ones you get ads for on podcasts. And this is where you can customize your space on the internet. So if you don't feel like you fit in with any of those other platforms, you can look into a personal website. And the great thing about a personal website is you can mold it and flex it into whatever you want based on your career. And every few years, if it doesn't feel like it fits your brand, you can kind of turn it into a different direction. Now, I will say with these is this one where it's kind of a pay to play. So the more money you put into it, the better your web page is going to look, especially if you want to own your own domain name. So as I said, I don't have my own website. So if any of y'all have your own website and you want to share, please share it in the chat box. I love looking at different scientists' websites and see how they curate their space on the internet in these websites. Oh, wait, the actual chat was, is a website necessary for a successful job search? I've heard this before, especially on the faculty side. Do you need like a scientific website to get a faculty position? I would say largely no. It is not a necessary part of getting a faculty position. The only place where I've heard that having a professional website is really going to give you a leg up is if you are in the coding space, the data science space. A lot of times for those positions, they're going to want to see proof of your work. So having a professional website that's linked to your GitHub and you can talk about your code, I have heard that can be beneficial, but again, it's not an essential part. Okay, and here's where I'm using the chat box to share your personal website. I see someone has included theirs. That is awesome. I'm gonna have to go check that out afterwards. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so content creation and sharing. So I just mentioned GitHub. GitHub is for data and coding programs. SlideShare is great for obviously slides. I see a lot of educators use SlideShare to host their slide decks on the internet and share them. So if you have a personal website and you want to go into education, you can actually mold your website into, you know, who you are as a teacher. You can include your syllabi, sample lesson plans, and sample slides right up on there. So YouTube, Instagram, and actually now TikTok are becoming kind of the big main platforms for sharing science. And there, as I said, are some people doing awesome, awesome work on all of those platforms. It was hard for me to like put up just 3 on here because there's so many great creators on these platforms in the science space. If you have any of your favorite like Instagrammers or YouTube channels or TikTok people who are doing really cool things in the STEM field, throw them in the chat. I'm always looking for more people to follow. So these 3 platforms take a lot of work. You know, creating the graphics for an Instagram post and writing the caption, obviously writing an entire YouTube and filming an entire YouTube video is a lot of work. TikTok, I can't even figure out how to make a TikTok. I watch TikTok, I don't know how to make it. So all of these channels take an extra layer of work and effort into learning the platform, learning the video editing, the photo editing process. But again, it can be a really cool place to talk about science. So check those out. If you're interested in science outreach, science communication, it can be a really cool aspect to your career. Oh yeah, Science Sam. I do follow Science Sam, Science Uncovered. So if you don't know Science Sam, she was a PhD student. She's now graduated, who basically started an Instagram, Twitter during grad school. And now I think she's doing it full time after she graduated. So Twitter and Facebook do have some content creation sharing aspects to them, but I'm going to talk about them in the next section. So social and community building. This is where I say you can't find your voice if you don't use it. So Twitter is obviously all about sharing your opinion on things or sharing the latest work. And it can be a little bit intimidating to speak that publicly. And I totally understand if you feel fearful about talking on any of these platforms or sharing your work on any of these platforms. So if you're approaching these platforms, you just signed up and you're like, oh gosh, I'm not ready to talk, that's okay. You can sign up in what I call lurk for a few months, see how people say things, how they share things, you know, what things are controversial versus not controversial. And you can really learn how to build that voice over time. So social and community building, Facebook. So to be truthful, I don't use Facebook anymore personally. I have one, you know, just because my office uses a Facebook, so I have to have Facebook to run it. But I know people do share content on there, you know, from a science perspective. And I think it can be a very valuable place for you as scientists to talk to your friends and family members about science, about the importance of science. Obviously, Facebook has a bit of a negative reputation for sharing misinformation. So, you know, if you are brave enough to go into that, good on you. I am not. And then there is Slack. So the reason I put this as a social networking platform is that, you know, I think a lot of people use it for like private groups, your lab, office, group projects, but there is actually a social aspect to it. So there's a grad student Slack, a future PI Slack, new PI Slack, and mid-career PI Slack. And so if you're interested in, you know, going the faculty route or you're a grad student right now, you can actually join these Slack groups who talk about, you know, what's going on in that grad student world today, advice on how to, you know, deal with something. So it's really just a place to find a community of people. And then there's Twitter. So Twitter has been my social media of choice to use professionally. I've been on there about 3.5 years now. And the reason I love it is because, kind of like LinkedIn, it's kind of a jack of all trades. It's my personal learning network. It is my network and community building and collaboration builder. It's my hub to have conversations with my colleagues, with the leadership, and with PhD students, with postdocs that I work with, and other people from all over the world. It's also a place where you can do outreach or advocacy for different things and causes that you care about. And it's also a place where you can actually do a little bit of job searching. There are certain hashtags like postdoc job, or, you know, hashtag postdoc or hashtag SciPol jobs. You just have to figure out the right hashtag, and then you can start to see curated jobs right on Twitter. Now, I could talk about Twitter for like 2 or 3 hours, so I'm not going to dive too much into it, but I do want to highlight a few really great hashtags that are in Twitter, or that have been popular on Twitter, where you can read about people's stories and experiences in STEM. So take a look at all of those and follow along. All right, so if any of you are on social media professionally and you feel comfortable sharing your Twitter handle, please go ahead and share it. So I'm gonna share mine, even though it's on the slide, but go ahead and throw it up in there. Okay. So as I said earlier, you do not have to be on all of these platforms. It is a full-time job to be on the internet on all of these platforms. And you have to be in like some type of communication, or, you know, own your own business in order to really have the time and the need to use all of these different platforms. So if you want to have a more low maintenance approach to your online presence, what I recommend is your ORC ID. You got to get that scientific number, and then just have a static profile somewhere. So just a profile that you update whenever it needs to be updated. It can be a ResearchGate or a LinkedIn, and that's it. That's all you need. Check it, you know, once or twice a year, whenever you need to check it. If you want to engage a little bit further, you can attempt social media. So you can pick one of those platforms like Twitter or Instagram and just follow along and listen, build your personal learning network, and just use the platform just to have kind of a curated news feed. You don't actually have to say anything. And then if you want to go even further, this is kind of the high maintenance category, where you have a dynamic profile where you're updating things, often creating content to add to that profile. You're engaging and talking on social media, telling your story, sharing opinions, sharing work, and you can also be creating content on one of those various content creation profiles. So along with, you know, different levels of maintenance, different levels of engaging on the internet also can increase your potential to meet new people and build your network. So basically, the more you're on the internet, the more you're engaging on the internet, the more you're going to grow your network and build those new collaborations, meet new people in your discipline and outside of your discipline. So just take note that if you choose not to engage as much on the internet, you can still grow your network, you know, IRL in the real world. But the more and more you engage on the internet, the more you have a chance to grow your network and strengthen those relationships with the people that you meet. All right, so tips to keep it professional and safe. Now, before I dive into this, I just want to address that there was a recent paper this past week about professionalism this was in medicine, but it was retracted, thank goodness, because it was really just inappropriate to share and make these rules about what is and isn't professional for people to share on the internet. You know, I think really the only thing that's not professional to share is if you are a medical practitioner. You know, if you go into HIPAA violations, that is an obvious wrong thing to do. But sharing pictures of yourself, you know, having your real life, that is something that is personal. And I think each person can share whatever they want on the internet and whatever they feel is appropriate. I don't think other people can tell us what is and isn't professional. So that'll get off my soapbox for that. So this is what I do. So I do recommend setting boundaries. I actually wrote an article about this with ASBMB about, you know, how I set boundaries on my professional profile versus my, this is supposed to say personal profiles. So you can see I have two different pictures here. One is my professional social media face and one is my personal social media face. These profiles on different platforms are completely separate. I keep my personal stuff private, locked down, only follow and friend people that I know, you know, from my personal life. Whereas my more professional profiles, those are the ones that are open, they're not private. I very much curate the content that's on there. And I also set boundaries such as how much time I spend on these profiles. On my professional side, I think about what topics I do and don't want to engage with. Again, those are personal for each person. So again, you do want to keep track of where you are on the internet and update and cross-market your profiles. I think if you would just want to keep it easy, have your one headshot and use it for all your professional profiles. That way it's consistent between different pages. I do want you all to consider your future employers and your new connections. This is not me saying don't share your opinion on the internet. This is me saying just consider who's out there reading your content. This is actually a screenshot down here from when we had an employer visit our office. And they said, social media is a reflection of you as an individual. So with this statement, they're not saying, you know, do or don't share stuff. Just know that it's going to reflect on you in your job search. So I think we all are adults and can figure out what that means for us personally. Privacy options. This is something that's really important. And thankfully, with all of the privacy issues that happened in past years, each platform has become more and more flexible to pick and choose exactly what you do and don't want to share publicly. Now it's the internet, so honestly, I think all of our information, anywhere you put on the internet, is not private. That's my own philosophy with it. So, you know, if you really want something to stay truly, truly private, don't ever put it on the internet. But, you know, for LinkedIn, you can pick and choose kind of which parts of your profile you want to be public, you know, public to only people who are on LinkedIn or public to only people who are connected to you. So make sure you just revisit different privacy options every once in a while. Another thing I make sure to do is location settings. So I turn off my location settings for pictures. And for example, on Twitter, I never say where I live other than, you know, Baltimore City. I never say which neighborhood I live in. I don't take pictures of my neighborhood and share them. You know, I try to be really careful with my own personal safety. So the internet is full of trolls and terrible people. There's no better way to say it. It's just full of terrible people. And the more you put yourself on the internet, the more you're going to come across these people. So if you have a troll or a creepy person, or basically if someone's making you feel uncomfortable on the internet, my philosophy is block them and don't engage with them. You don't owe anyone anything. You don't owe an answer. You don't owe them, you know, a response to their direct message, just go ahead and block them and don't engage. And then finally, ethics. So this is where I'm going to dive into, you know, sharing science and sharing medicine on the internet. So I love this quote. This is actually for medical professionals, but I think it kind of applies broadly. Don't lie, don't pry, don't cheat, can't delete, don't steal, and don't reveal. So when you are on the internet professionally and you claim expertise to an area, you kind of have a responsibility to share stuff in a responsible manner. That was a terrible statement, be responsible. But basically, you know, don't lie about your work, don't pry into other people's lives, don't share or misrepresent your work. The internet, you know, is forever, so you can't delete anything. If you are using someone else's data or images or words, make sure you always quote them. And then for those of you who are in medical professions or dealing with people who are underage, please be careful about the information you share about those people. So each institution at this day probably has developed their own social media guidelines. These are the ones for Hopkins Medicine. So you can read those there. I really encourage everyone to go ahead and read the social media guidelines for their different institution. Now, just because you're part of an institution, does that mean you have to follow their guidelines? Does this, you know, apply to students? Does it apply to postdocs? Is it just for employees? You know, different expectations and different guidelines will say it, but I'm going to say if you're on the internet and you affiliate yourself with the institution, regardless if you say, you know, opinions are mine, you are always going to reflect back on your institution, you know, even if you say you don't want to. That's just the way the internet works. As a scientist at Hopkins, if someone looks at my Twitter profile, they're going to affiliate what I say with my institution. I thought it was interesting for those of you who are affiliated with Hopkins, and I'm sure other institutions did this as well. They actually went in through and sent us an email right at the beginning of the pandemic back in March about appropriate social media use and sharing science and updated stuff about COVID, because this was kind of becoming an issue, and they basically want to make sure that scientists not only are sharing the right things, but are protected on what they say. So responsible conduct of research on social media. So I like this quote, don't lie, steal, or distort data. A researcher is still a researcher, even on social media. So, and then there's this other quote about misleading the general public by publicly presenting deceptive or distorted information. So if you are going to share your research, make sure you do it carefully and thoughtfully. So when to talk about your research, if it's published, talk about it. If it's pre-printed, talk about it. If it's in prep, not published, that's when you need to talk to your principal investigator, talk to your collaborators and say, you know, make sure you ask permission about, you know, what can and can't we talk about right now. There's a difference between sharing your results and just sharing your day-to-day of what you're doing in the, you know, in the lab. You know, back when I was in the lab, I liked to talk about what I was doing day to day and kind of walk through people a day in the life of a scientist. You know, I was collecting murine mouse macrophages or bone marrow, you know, doing all of that process just because I thought it was cool to kind of give people an insight into the day in the life of a scientist. But you can talk about your experiments without talking about the end result of the experiments, and kind of, you can talk about the big picture ideas, but just be mindful of sharing the exact details of everything you're doing when it's not published. I also want you all to be mindful of various topics that could be controversial. I'm not saying don't talk about these topics. I'm saying these topics are the ones that are going to attract the trolls. They're going to attract the naysayers. And so if you do choose to talk about them, just be prepared to deal with perhaps the negative side of the internet. So anything with animal research, you have the PETA enthusiasts who may take anger with that. A few years ago, there was a horrible story of a graduate student who studied songbirds, and PETA just ripped her apart for what she was talking about. for no reason. Obviously, her research was approved and ethical, but just be mindful. So if you do have an animal model for your organism, you can be, thoughtful about the way you talk about that type of work. Vaccines, obviously a hot topic on the internet. CRISPR, a few months ago, when was that? That was actually years ago. 2018, back when, there was the ethical issues around CRISPR and doing CRISPR on actual humans. And then right now, COVID is actually a very hot topic. And a lot of people have gotten in trouble with sharing pre-printed results, that weren't exactly, I don't want to say truthful, but weren't as robust as they could be. And speaking on different research before it was really robust and peer reviewed. So just be mindful of sharing and talking about these topics. So bringing the internet to the real world. Can't really do the real world right now, but once everything starts to reopen and we kind of start to talk to people, this is where the internet really comes alive, is you want to actually meet the people that you're talking to on the internet. You want the internet to actually benefit you in your career in real ways. So you kind of have to actually make that connection between your internet presence and the real world people that you're interacting with. So different examples of way to do this. I don't know if business cards will exist after COVID, but if we do have business cards, you can actually put your Twitter handles on there, or your Instagram, or a QR code to your LinkedIn. For right now, I like to include my Twitter on my presentation slides that I'm okay with people sharing. You can also set up meetings with people. So if we ever do go back to conferences that are in real life, or even if you have a virtual conference where there is the opportunity to connect one-on-one with people, say if you have, this friend that you've met on Twitter and you've actually never had a conversation and they're going to the same conference, why not reach out to them and say, hey, I love your content on Twitter. I'd love to meet you in person, and set up a chance to meet them at their poster or meet them for coffee. Another thing you can do is if you follow someone on social media or on LinkedIn or somewhere and you see them in real life, say hi. I love when people do this. I've done this up to other people. I've been stopped at the bus stop with people saying, hey, I follow you on Twitter. I've stopped people, after seminars. I follow you on Twitter. I love what you do. I just wanted to say hi in real life. So not only does this, make people feel good, but it also strengthens that relationship. I know the people that I've met in real life on Twitter are the people I engage with their tweets more. I love keeping up with their career, and it just kind of takes that relationship and that connection to the next level. And then finally, some conferences actually have ways for people to meet up, if they engage on different platforms. So I know some conferences have what are called tweet ups, where you just meet up with everyone else who uses Twitter. And I'm sure those of you who are on Twitter know that attending a conference in person and attending it on Twitter, it's like two huge conferences happening in parallel, which is really cool. You can actually have an entire, conference that's going on the internet while you're there in person as well. You can be keeping up with what's going on at the other symposiums and the other lectures that you can't go to. So why not meet the other people who are tweeting about the work you're interested in? So that is the end of my talk right there. So if any of you all have questions, please type them in the chat. I'm happy to talk about, how do you deal with this situation on the internet? How do you deal with different profiles or whatnot? We can talk about them. Before you all leave, as you're typing your questions, I do want to give a shout out for what's coming up next. So we have about, 2 o'clock? An hour break before the next session. So coming up at 3 o'clock, there will be an alumni career panel. And then for about 50 minutes, and then you're going to break out into different breakout rooms. So you can have a chance to talk with the different alumni or the LANS alumni who are on the panel. So I highly recommend going to that. Those will be great sessions. Yeah. But if you don't have any questions, feel free to take an hour off. I'm going to go eat lunch. And